ravers, and welcome to the circus. More of a carnival really, but more on that later. And hello almost to 2025. This is a podcast where we speak to creative people. We're all creative in our own way. Go for a walk can be creative, but don't get me started on psychogeography. Let's just say we talk to people from the creative industries about what they do, how they think, and the TV show that can be enjoyed whatever season, come rain or shine, the X-Files. Can't believe it's been a year since I was last wishing you a happy new year. Well, actually, it's bad luck to say that until it is the new year, so I'll just say, happy new year for when it comes, wherever you are. Again, no resolutions this year, other than just keep on doing what you're doing. You're doing the best you can in very difficult circumstances. Try not to worry too much, get a bit of exercise if you can, don't be so hard on yourself, all that stuff. And to quote last week's guest, Ailey, we should all probably be dancing more, which is exactly what we plan to do with today's guest. It's the dancer, choreographer and artistic director of Dance Space, Tony Mills. Tony moved to Orkney from Ghana at the age of 6, and after initially pursuing a career in veterinary medicine, he discovered his love of dance, in part through classes at Dance Space, which he talks about later, and he's been a professional dance artist in Scotland for almost 20 years. I'm not going to reel off the multitude of places that Tony's worked with, but I'll put them in the bio to have a look through, and he talks about a couple of them. Tony's also a keen ambassador for the break scene in Scotland, something else he also talks about. In the chat, Tony talks about growing up in Orkney, taking over the reins at Dance Space, his family's reaction to becoming a dancer, new exciting dance trends from around the world, horror films, of course, and we still get time to talk about The X-Files Season 2, Episode 20, Humbug. I mean, it's a shame we didn't schedule this one in for the Christmas issue, isn't it? I could have done a Christmas Carol crossover there, but in this episode, Mulder and Scully investigate a series of murders in a community of former circus sideshow performers. I should say this chat with Tony took place at the beginning of 2024 this year, so we do talk a lot about what was upcoming then at this year's Edinburgh Fringe. A lot of those shows will still be doing the rounds out and about, so do seek them out. Really enjoyed speaking with Tony. He's a fantastic and energetic presence, and we get into some disturbing horror film chat towards the end. As always, if you like our show, please do leave me a message via email, subscribe, review, follow us on X, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. But in the meantime, a happy new year to you all when it comes, and we're exhuming your potato. Here's Tony.
I'm alright, very busy at the moment, lots going on, looking forward to the Fringe, looking forward to a holiday, actually, which I think is very well earned. I'm juggling many things, my hands are very busy. It's a very, very busy time at the moment, basically.
Yeah, and what can we expect for the Dance Space lineup this year?
Well, you can expect the world at Dance Space once more.
Yes. Yes.
Basically, that's it. The world comes to Dance Space. Yeah, we've got 29 shows throughout the month, like different performances, different companies, different artists from 16 countries. I think something like 257 or 58 shows in total that you can go and see at Dance Space for the month. We'll also be running a program of public classes and professional classes, so we're bringing that back. We kind of lost that in the last couple of years because we were responding to the economic climate, as it were, or headwinds and challenges of the various euphemisms that are flying around. But no, it's good to bring that back. We're also back to doing 2 full studios, so it's going to be a big program. It'll be my first time as the artistic director there. It's been like my full program.
Yes.
So I'm quite excited and nervous as well. I've been lucky enough to go around and go to festivals and see work, and then I've been making contacts, and so trying to bring all those international people that I've met and stuff like that now to Edinburgh to see the program. I also see the work from Scottish artists and stuff like that. So I'm just hoping that we will, deliver the festival smoothly for everybody, for the staff and for the artists. Yeah.
What does it have to be for you to see it and it to spark something inside you? Is it a story that connects, a dancer story that connects with you, or is it a specific type of way they're approaching, their practice, or is it a lot of different things?
Yeah, it's a lot of different things actually. I mean, I've certainly got my own taste in the things that I'm personally interested in as a human and as an artist. But I realized that curating or programming is maybe the word. Well, I like to call it curating, shall we say? Like the Festival at Dance Space is a mixture of programming the artist that you're really excited about and that work that you think needs to be seen, and also filling those kind of slots in the program because because of the way that the Fringe model runs, those slots need to be filled in order to keep the thing sustainable.
Yeah.
So you have a balance between obviously wanting to fill your slots, make your program sustainable, keep your partners that you might be working with happy as well, and then also try to create a really interesting, diverse program that maybe speaks to something, because that's what artists want to do at the end of the day. And I still, even though I've joined the organization, I'm still the sort of dancer and choreographer, and I wanted to try and transfer my artistic practice, my dance practice into this. So I'm still trying to convey something. So in terms of that, like the work that's really stood out for me, sometimes it's maybe what it signifies, it's maybe what an artist is trying to do and how hard they're fighting for a space to be seen actually, and we can sort of do that. We've got an artist coming from Singapore called Hasiema Harith, from a company called Prisma, and she's a sort of traditional Malay artist, and it's a very interesting, very powerful piece about abortion in the region, and I'm really excited that we're going to be able to give this artist a platform to be seen on a really international scale, for the potential for that work to be picked up, because it's one that we've been trying to get here for some time. I saw it like over 2 years ago and met the artists. I taught at the studio some years ago and stuff like that. So I had a bit of familiarity with them. So it's great that you can make those kind of things happen. And then equally, we're committed to presenting the Scottish artists, who are working hard here in Scotland as well, to showcase their work. So, and it's great that this year we can present I think we've got 11 artists from Scotland, all the way from emerging to established, all giving you a sort of a breadth of that. And this year we're really going to try and platform that. And there was one artist, I guess sometimes it can be charisma as well.
Yeah.
Actually, there was one artist, very interesting dude, this guy called Asai Wilson, he's from Luxembourg. And I got invited to an industry day, so I found out through this job that there's tons of these industry days that organisation folk meet up at and see work and discuss programs and things like that.
Yeah. And
so there was a showcase, and there's a new Luxembourg Arts Council was recently formed called Cultural X, and Luxembourg's a wealthy country, so they put on a showcase and they invite people to come. And artists usually, there's a bit of networking, you can meet people, and there's various kinds of pitches. There's basically, sometimes you'll see the full work, sometimes you'll see a bit of an excerpt, and sometimes you'll just see a talk and a presentation. And this guy gave a presentation, and he showed this film. It started with this film, and he's sitting in a living room, and slowly it transpires that he's actually deep underwater, and it's a whole like film that he's done underground. And he said he had to train for a year to be able to hold his breath, to be able to do it, so he wouldn't panic and stuff like that,
Right.
And then he was showing little clips of some of his work, and he was describing one of the pieces it's him underneath a red heat lamp, and he's just all this sort of feral, animalistic kind of movement, and he's saying like he wants the audience to feel like they're in a cage with a trapped animal, and things like that. Because for me, it's about speaking with your body.
Yeah. At
the end of the day, like that's the unique place that dance has in terms of where in society and how it fits in our lives, and how it communicates things in ways that we can't, So when people start talking about I want you to feel this way, through what I'm doing, I find like that's really interesting to me, because that's I think what dancers, there's movers and other kinds of people that using the body and stuff like that. But in terms of dance, I think it's that body, mind, spirit, getting you to feel something, to resonate with you.
Yeah.
And so that kind of guttural, very visceral sort of like language, without words, but also very intelligent, because your body is incredibly smart, stores all these experiences that live in you, really, live deep down inside you, and being able to tap into that in some ways, or interpret it, utilize your power, your physical power, your expressive power. So so this guy, he just did this pitch, and he showed some of the stuff, and he turned around to the crowd, and he's like, he sort of winked his eye, and he was like, pretty cool, and everyone was like laughing. And he was just such a charismatic dude who knew he knew what he had, something really interesting here, wasn't sort of like arrogant about it. And then I got chatting to him afterwards, and he'd made this little promo pack, and artists make their own promo packs and to give to people and stuff like that. And that in itself was a work of art, and I just like that, this guy he's taking real detail, real attention to detail. And I just felt like this fella's got a really interesting way of, his creative inquiries are really interesting. So he's actually got a piece which I'm hoping that we're going to bring next year. It's very interesting, actually. Basically, it's a bit of a spoiler alert maybe, but let's see if it comes. Yeah. It's basically he's exploring using electro pads, like those muscle stimulators and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, that you have like when you're pregnant.
Yeah. And like Bruce Lee had it when he was doing his, I think it was in Enter the Dragon or something like that, and he was, or there was some, it was the Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, and there was a scene where he was just like, had these things on him, and his muscles were twitching away. So basically, he's worked out, he's created this pack, attaches to the dancers' bodies, and basically controls them through an algorithm. And can create any kind of algorithm which basically, and so it sends these electrical impulses which tenses the muscles, therefore flex or extends the arms, limbs, and stuff like that. And it's wild. Wow. Like I just thought it was just utterly wild.
And does he leave that to sort of go, or can he control it like a puppeteer live if he wanted to as well?
I'm not sure like exact ins and outs, but he basically can create different, you can just create a different algorithm whenever you want. I'm sure there's some limitations. I was kind of interested. We were talking about the Fringe, and I was like, well, how can you think your dancers could sustain, shows back to back, being electrically like stimulated? So it's feasible. Yeah. So things like that really, sort of stand out. Like sometimes just the sheer quality of people's work, like the joy that comes through their dance. The uniqueness of somebody's practice. Is a really interesting artist called Alma Soderberg from Sweden. And she's got this kind of vocal, rhythmic, polyphonic, practice that sort of starts with the voice, but then moves into the body and then becomes this dance and stuff like that. And she did this solo piece. It's called New Old, and it's her just sitting on a chair, and she's doing all these different kinds of rhythms with her voice and gestures with her hand, but it's so precise. And I think what's so fascinating is when somebody has gone so deep into their practice that they discover, or that they start to carve out something very original, which has its own sort of like logic in it that maybe you don't quite understand, but you can sort of see it's there. There's a sort of quality and a kind of rigor. Yeah. And that kind of thing is amazing to see, and that's the kind of stuff like you want to be able to put on stage.
And does that speak to how you would approach your own work as a performer as well? Do you approach things through a theme, or are you approaching things? I mean, I'm just working off, having been a musician for most of my life. Sometimes I'll meet other musicians, and for want of a better word, we'll, jam out some ideas or just try out some things. So would you approach a piece of work with like, we'll warm up, we'll start getting into a feel of a movement, and then we'll see what comes out of that? Or can you be a bit more dictatorial in terms of this piece of work is about this, therefore I need to incorporate this type of movement into it?
I think originally when I started making shows and making performances, I was very clear about the end point. I was like, I sort of knew what the what the story was or what I was trying to convey, and I had very clear images in my mind about scenes and things like that. And then from that, I would sort of build up a kind of, didn't necessarily have to be a narrative in terms of like a theatrical one or something like that, but an order, a kind of logic.
Right.
And all my work always had this sense of journey, I guess. Like we were always going through something. The character or the protagonist was always going through something to some degree, like some sort of process. I made work very visually, and then sort of would fill in stuff around that. Sometimes even I would come up with a title.
Right.
And if I got a really good title for something, all of a sudden the rest of the sort of the image of it and what it was about started to fill in, because the title kind of underpinned the the point of it. The title would be a double entendre or something like that. It would have the same meaning, which actually conveyed what the actual piece was all about. So I would kind of expand from there, and then I kind of realized that I had this habit, and it would mean that I was very fixed on maybe certain end points, and I wasn't perhaps so open to new things that might occur during the creative process, So I did a project called the Death of a Leaf, which I never managed to get to stage, but I did it for a little while, and that was really an opportunity to start to really try and work from completely the opposite direction, to have no idea, like to go into the studio with dancers and just be like, right, go into my toolbox and start jamming, start moving, and start seeing what emerged. And I did. It was a really interesting process, actually, because I worked with this musician. He's called the Reverse Engineer, Dave House, in Edinburgh, and I'd watched this company. They're called a company called Fighting Monkey. They're a pair of like dancers. They're very hardcore. They're through like, I think a company like Ultima Vez, which are very big, like European companies, very physical, lots of daring movement and stuff like that. And they went off. They started their own thing called Fighting Monkey, which is basically like a movement, like pedagogy and stuff like that. A bit like the Ido Portal stuff, But it's a lot more. I would say it's a lot more intense, actually, And he was talking about this guy. The lead guy is called Joseph Furzek or something like that. And he was talking about how they always start, when you're dancing, you always start in a studio.
Yeah. Most
of the time, not everybody. Lots of people have different practices and stuff like that. But for the most part, we go into a studio. And it really kind of struck a chord with me. I thought, you're right. We'll go to the studio, very sterile, even, safe, predictable space, and then try to find unpredictability on all this kind of stuff, So the basis of Death of a Leaf was to not start in the studio, was to start in different types of environments. So we went out to Tinnin Beach.
Yeah.
So I wanted somewhere where there was water, there was kind of sand, there was like grass, there was trees. We spent about a day there, or a day and a half, or something like that. We went to Dollar Hill.
Oh yeah, I've driven past it. I mean, it's like this mythical place where I've never been.
And that was an amazing day because the mist was really low. And so when we climbed up, we were climbing through the mist, and by the time you got to the top, I think it was only about 300 meters, it looked like you were, in Mount Olympus, because you were on the top and everywhere was just covered with the clouds, which was quite interesting. And so like we were up there, and the idea was to work with the challenge, right? So that if you were on uneven ground, the case wasn't don't go to somewhere where it's nice and flat and then do some improv. When you find those sticky moments that sort of jab you in your side and you're going to move away from it, just see if you can stay there a little bit and see what comes out of it.
Yes.
And so like, working with the difficulty. And so and it produced really, really interesting, like, very visceral, very grounded, very rich kind of quality of movement that the dancers managed to sort of like embody. It wasn't like go and be a tree, but it was like capturing the essence or the ethos or the energy of what it was like to be out there, or the negotiation of the challenge. Yeah. Which was totally unique to that space. And then Dave would go around and he would collect the sounds and stuff like that. And then we would come back in the studio and then sort of see if we could retain that essence that we had outside and sort of like shape it a little bit in the studio. And that was the really interesting sort of process, like for me, not having any idea of what it looked, and let it sort of evolve, and try to sort of trust your instincts and things like that. And we did it once here in Edinburgh. We did it also again up in near Inverness, and there was a company called Plan B who had a space up there, and we were up in the Highlands. We went up to Stack Polly, which is another quite tall little mountain or hill, which was quite something. We all climbed up to the top and we all used that. And that was a really interesting experiment, which turned into quite a long project and stuff like that. But it was interesting to work from like the inside out instead of the outside in.
Just really fascinating that you also this idea of working with the difficulties of a terrain as well, and putting the, like, we could do blue sky, we could do anything, so what are the constraints we can put on this performance and this bit of work, and how can we work within that? I think that's a really interesting way of approaching any project.
I think it's kind of interesting when you consider how creative people have had to get over time when they were faced with a barrier. Like in really hard times and times of war, or like real adversity, when people had to get incredibly creative. And it's that thing of sometimes when you put a restriction or a barrier there, it forces you to try to have to think differently. So sometimes it's a useful tool in dance, to put a restriction on something. Don't do the first two moves that come into your head, or something like that. You know what I mean? Or your back of your hand is frozen 1 meter from the ground.
Interesting.
Do that.
You sort of alluded there to you talk about the piece of work that started off with use of vocals and moved into a piece of dance work. Are you noticing more of a shift to incorporate mixed media in your works? Because I mean, I don't, from a sort of theatre point of view, I definitely am, and it feels like it's very, I don't know if it is a sort of a sort of moment in time that's incorporating more of that. But you're going to see like Ivan Van Hove piece, there's big video screens, and certainly a lot of the stuff in the West End, and there's a sort of relationship between what the performers on stage are doing with some other type of media. But has it always been like that, or is it just, are we embracing more of that, and why do you think that is?
Well, I guess from an independent artist point of view, these days you've got a lot more tools at your disposal, which you can apply your artistic lens to. I mean, dancers or filmmakers or whoever, they have a practice, maybe that's their forte, but that doesn't mean they can't apply their, the way they look at things through other tools and through other mediums. I've certainly, bought myself a gimbal, got what is it, like, there's a really fancy film app you can get to get your 4K.
Oh, it's great, that Filmic app, yeah.
Yeah, Filmic, right? And then I bought the lenses and all the rest of it, and so you can, for if you can spare a few quid, you can turn your phone into a pretty decent cinematography kind of like device, and if you've got ideas and things like that, or visions and all, you can do that, and then you can publish it, or you can write so you can publish it on Instagram or whatever. So I think these days there's more tools available for people who are naturally quite curious, as artists are.
Yeah.
And then I suppose there is a thing within the industry where folk are looking for opportunities, and they're looking to be able to present their work in so many different ways. We've got a live version, we've got a film version, we've got an indoor version, we've got an outdoor version, we've got a version with one person, we've got a version with 5 people, because the opportunities are so thin on the ground, and artists are doing their best to fit into any and all opportunity, even if it's sometimes not quite the medium. There's like trying to look to find ways to kind of how you can access support in other areas of the sector that supports different mediums and things like that, by sort of diversifying your practice.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think there's the urge that artists have naturally to be curious and to access those things, and you can access pretty much anything these days, and to be creative with it and then share it. And then also I think there's probably the pressure in the sector to be a portfolio artist, or to you've got a piece of work that, I mean, I did it actually. I made a show that had a bit of a film in it. It was incorporated into the piece. And then from that, I kind of extracted the film and then sent it off to film festivals, and nothing got paid for, but you got into a few small online festivals around the world, and it was quite, I guess, good exposure.
Yeah.
So there you go. But I'm not a filmmaker,
Yeah.
And I suppose overall, it can only bring a more kind of like interesting and sort of like exciting artwork, I imagine, at the end of the day.
Yeah. No, I definitely noticed. I mean, there's a whole thing during lockdown where comedians went, "What the bloody hell are we going to do now? How are we going to perform? We can't. I can't go to a gig in Plymouth. There's no gig on in Plymouth. So, there's this whole shift to how do we perform online? How do we still build a following? And I know a lot of acts who really they're sort of facing burnout now, because it's just the turnover of this pressure to constantly be delivering online content. And you get people who really like Alistair Green, and I guess Limmy did really well off the back of it. But it's certainly definitely a pressure, as well as if you're trying to create some live work. So that's an interesting idea to sort of something that's there to sort of market you is also can be part of your process.
I think you've got to have a real appetite to be successful in that. If putting out content is part of your thing, you've got to, I feel like, because it's so time consuming. I mean, we try and do a little bit of, I used to do it when I had my own company, but it's really time consuming. And like you say, there's people like Limmy, I guess, or I've got a good friend down in London who's a filmmaker, and the guy's absolutely incessant, always putting out material. Right. And I think in that respect, if you're going to use that medium, I think sometimes individuals who have that trait, just put out the volume, tend to, I think from seeing it to do pretty well.
And is it and what's it like coming back to Dance Base? Because am I right in thinking that Dance Base basically responsible for how you got into dance in the first place? Is that right? That you did some dance course, you had an interest in it, and then you did some dance courses when you were training in veterinary surgery. Is that right?
Well,
I just made that up. I feel like that's the myth.
That's the myth. No, I'll tell you what the real myth is.
Yeah.
Okay, the real myth was that there was a young lad back on the Isle of Sandy in Orkney who got the opportunity to be in Joseph's Amazing Technical, the Dreamcoat School production. Right. And during the rehearsal, he kind of went off piste and did a bit of a dance freestyle solo. And one teacher was reprimanding him, saying, "Don't do that. Don't go off script or whatever." Another teacher, who somehow, I guess, maybe had more authority, perhaps, I don't know, more standing in the teacher's realm, back then, said, no, let's keep that in, and kept it in. And that, I think, is the birth of Tony Mills, really.
Yeah, that.
And I also have to give credit to a guy called Edward Kendall, who was a dorm mate, because you had to go to like a hostel. Once you reached a certain age, you had to go to a different island to go to school, and so we were staying in a hostel. And Edward Kendall was in the next room, in the same dorm. He was the first person I saw do the Running Man in the school disco. And Edward Kendall was like English, and at that time, that was you got a lot of flack for that up there.
Right.
Just want to say that folk from Orkney are also the kindest people you'll meet, by the way. I know that firsthand. But you would get a bit of flack for that. But Eddie was the best dancer in the school, and he got some attention for that. And so I have to give him credit for like setting a bit of a competitive spirit, because we would try to one up each other in like different moves for the different school discos. And then by the time I came to Edinburgh, I kind of had that bug, and then I went to classes at the Modern Dance Society, and then there was a guy called Wallace Sully, who was a breaker at the time, and he used to teach classes at Dance Base with Alan Irvin, who had a company called Freshmess. Right. And so I would go along on the Saturdays, and it would be literally like living for the Saturdays. It was up at the assembly rooms, and you go through the main entrance, and there's a studio right at the back, so you go through the big grand hall and all the rest of it, cut through the doors, and there'd be a little marble waiting area, and it'd be me and there'd be a few other folk in the class, and everybody would be practicing their moves from last week on the marble, getting ready for it and stuff like that. So so I owe Dance Base a huge amount, for sure.
Do you have you got back to Orkney much recently? Do you still have folks, based there or not?
I haven't been back in some time. It's quite a sad state of affairs, actually. Yeah, my father was the doctor on the island there, so we moved up in 1986.
Right.
And I was 6 years old, because I remember getting my 7th birthday cake.
Nice.
I remember that image very clearly. And then, Dad must have retired maybe 15 years ago or something like that. At least 10, 15 years ago. And since then, not really been back in sort of maybe 10 years. I did tour a show there, which I was quite happy to do. Toured one in 2014. I think that was maybe the last time I was back,
And so what was your experience like of coming to Edinburgh then? Was it a bit of a culture shock for you, or was it just like, well, this is where I am now, I'm going to fully embrace this?
I suppose a bit like that, to be honest, just sort of, I guess, just took it in my stride. I have an older brother and older sister. My older brother's 9 years, and my sister's 6 years older than me. So my older brother had come to Edinburgh to do dentistry.
Right.
So I'd been here a few times with my parents and kind of visited him, been in Pollock Halls and all the rest of it. So I sort of was familiar with Edinburgh a little bit, and it's kind of one of my, and I guess when I was applying for uni, I was like, I'd hope to come to Edinburgh. And I've also been down and visited London a few times with my sister, and kicked around London on my own when I was a teenager. And being away from home, actually, from about the age of 14, because about that time you started going to your standard grades, and you had to go to Kirkwall, which was about an hour and a half boat ride away, and you spend pretty much the whole month there. You come back like one weekend in a month. So I was pretty used to being away from my parents by the time I got to Edinburgh Uni, actually, to the point at which I was kind of like, I would be with friends and stuff like that, and they'd all be going home for their parents. I'm like, well, what's the big deal here? Why is everyone leaving the weekend? I soon cocked on, maybe I should go back home.
Was there any kickback from your folks then when you said, actually, I'm going to embrace the arts here and not go into veterinary?
On the whole, they were pretty supportive. I probably got away with it because I was like the youngest of three.
Yes,
and, my brother definitely got sent down the academic route.
Yeah.
And my sister also studied to be a lawyer, and she was like, very good. I would say she's the best of the three of us. She's like a CEO for a charity in Australia now, doing really well. And so, I put the time in at uni, I put the hours in. I didn't go out as much, and I got through it. And I think at the end of the day, your folks just want to know that you can, well, I hope anyway, they want to know that you can just look after yourself. So there was a little bit of kind of like, worry, or is this a phase and all the rest of it. But there was an interesting moment, after I don't know how many years or how long after I graduated from uni, and I went to my cousin's wedding, cousin Amy, and you do the dance, and there's the first dance, and then the family come up, and I'm dancing there with my mum, and she just kind of like moves away like slowly and stuff like that, as if like, and basically goes like show us what you can do, basically,
right,
for the family. So I'm not gonna pass up a chance, right?
Yeah, this is your moment.
It's my moment, right? So I did a little thing, and then that was that. And then at the end, I'm like leaving with my brother, and my dad comes up and gets hold of me, and every time my dad is serious, he always kind of repeats himself, Right. So he comes up and he grabs me and he's like, son, son, son. I'm like, oh my God, what's he gonna say? He's like, you can dance now. If you want singing lessons, I will pay for them. And so that felt like a certain like acknowledgement,
right.
That they would just, okay, this is.
So he's already thinking triple threat then. By that
triple
point.
threat, yeah. If you're going to go in, you might as well go all the way. And I would have to say, I think the job at Dance Space has been an immense privilege, and it's a huge amount of work, but it's an immense privilege to do. But it was a huge pleasure to be able to phone my dad and tell him I finally have a salary. I was like,
yeah. Yeah, I'm on the website and everything now.
Yeah, it's legitimate. Look, here.
That's fantastic. this is the episode we're going to talk about is season 2, episode 20, Humbug. Straight off the back, I'm going to say this is one of my favourite episodes of not just this season, but the entirety of the X-Files. Firstly, I'd like to ask, what is your relationship like with the X-Files?
Like any person my age who had a good dose of, popular culture. Some of my friends were, we were really into the X-Files. We watch it every week. I think it was BBC 2, I think.
Yes.
Was it? I think, yeah. And I think some of my mates thought that Dana Scully was hot. I wasn't,
yes,
I wasn't.
I concur.
I wasn't one of those, stuff like that. But I like the kind of I like the sort of sci-fi nature of it. And I think the one thing that I could never figure out, and maybe you will confirm this or not, was the X on the window. I couldn't understand why Mulder kept putting this X with brown wrapping tape on the window. Was this stopping a sniper coming in? Like, what's going on here? And then of course there was that dude, Mr. X, and I think it was like about that. I think maybe you can let me know. Yeah. No,
you are absolutely correct. It was a sort of bat signal for Mr. X, who was a kind of stand-in who joined after Deep Throat got killed at the end of episode season 1.
Yes.
So he was on the way out, and then we got this replacement played by Stephen Williams, who stood in. It was going to be a female to play that character, and then she didn't give. I think she went off ill, and then there was ring Stephen, and Stephen turned up and just nailed it. So he's that's a whole thing that Mulder does in a kind of bat signal if you need some serious kind of information. But this this episode, Humbug, is it's set within the circus performer world. It starts with you've got some teenage kids playing at night under a full moon in an outdoor swimming pool. It's set up like they're being stalked by someone or something. This thing gets closer and closer through the shrubbery, jumps in the pool, and then shock horror. It's their dad. Don't worry, everybody. The dad's playing with the kids. But the dad looks to be a circus performer himself. Camera pulls back. He's known as the Alligator Man because he's got a unique look of skin that looks like kind of alligator skin. So he's having a nice time, sends the kids off, starts floating around in the swimming pool, and then another twist, he gets attacked by we don't know what, and then
it's not over.
It's another twist, and then we're into the episode, which as I say, involves this community of circus performers, and I just think it's such a distillation of what the X-Files is and is about, whilst also painting the leads as total squares in their own story. Yeah. Mulder's painted and told, mentioned throughout the show by the other cast members as look at him, he's the all-American hero. There he is. He's even stands at the end in a pose that looks like Superman with his coat flailing behind him. And is an object of ridicule. Scully, who's usually a kind of sort of quite sensible one of the two, doesn't get off very well either because she's a medical doctor, but comes across very squeamish throughout the entire show. People putting nails in the head and what have you, and she's very squeamish about that and any blood she sees. And also, there's little looks that she does where you can tell she's uncomfortable, being surrounded by people who don't look like her as well. And on top of that, also, this idea of looking throughout this episode, the scene in the Hall of Mirrors, you've got a lot of mirrors all the way through it and about what people look like, versus stereotypical conventional American inverted commas beauty. My favourite scene in this episode is Scully's in bed, she wakes up and she sees someone fall down past her window. It looks like someone's fallen from a great height, and she looks up and she sort of shakes her head and she looks out the window and she realises there's people trampolining out there, and it's such a weird, uncanny moment where there's cast members in this episode from Twin Peaks, but it feels like something that would happen in Twin Peaks. She's kind of second guessing what she's seeing throughout the entire episode. She opens a door and there's a character stood outside called Lanny. And he's got his he's wearing like a dressing gown, and he's got that open, and he's got we found out later he's got a conjoined twin, and the remnants of this conjoined twin is a bit on show, and he's a bit embarrassed by it, but he also looks over and looks at Gillian Anderson, who's also wearing a dressing gown as well, and is exposing herself, and there's this like look between them where she's looking at him, he's looking at her, not in a kind of sort of sexual way, but just in like a sort of like mainstream convention, looking at what's perceived to be the outsider, and the outsider looking back, and everybody feels uncomfortable. And on top of, you've got all this happening, and also you've got it's really silly, the episode, and you've got some great effects, really grotty Peter Jackson type effects.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's me banging on. What did you think about it?
It's interesting now you talk about the gaze thing, because I thought what was interesting was the conversation between Mulder and the motel keeper, and they got stuck into this kind of like duel, and perception and stuff like that, and it was like, and it was sort of, it was making this, it was making a very sort of like valid point. And now when you mention it about all the sort of the look, the guy with the face that was kind of half off in the sort of curio shop and everything like that, and the concepts and the way they did make Mulder out to be some kind of jock, basically. He's like a jock, like that. So it's interesting to think about this, this idea of the piece being about perception. I kind of felt it was sort of like this kind of whodunit film noir. This thing going around like popping off all these people, these carnival people, and then it's kind of like, have you seen the film The Hidden with the guy in Twin Peaks?
Yes.
Carl MacLachlan.
Yes, I've not seen that for a long time, but that's a great weird film.
It's like the alien that jumps from people to people and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And of course, it took me a while. I had to watch it back a second time. I didn't realise that the twin had obviously jumped into the conundrum, I think, at the end of it.
He's eaten. He's eaten by the conundrum.
He's eaten by the conundrum. I thought the twin had gone, and then he was sort of like, now he's going to live inside the sort of the conundrum, and it reminded me of like the Hidden.
Right.
Where I think the alien. Well, no, I think they do kill the alien, but the other alien lives on inside the cop or something like that.
Yeah, interesting. Like a sort of alien sort of spin-off.
But I thought it was a very kooky. It reminded me of sort of quite a kooky kind of spoofy film noir. I didn't quite catch the sort of the gaze aspect. I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, it does. Someone did describe this episode as feeling a bit like a very special Murder, She Wrote. So I get on that, but it is because I know you're a Peter Jackson fan, aren't you? Because this is one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on this podcast.
Yeah.
So I was like speaking to someone we both know, and they said, "Oh yeah, Tony made me watch this horrible film last night," and I was like, "What's that? I need to know what that is." And they said, "Oh, it's like this Peter Jackson film, Bad Taste," and I was like, "Right." I mean, I find Tony interesting anyway. It'd be great to talk about dance, but we need to get on to talking about really debauched cinema at some point.
I remember we watched that. I don't know when I must have been a teenager. It's one of those films that come out. It's like when I was young, my brother was like, he was 18, so he was getting all the over 18 videos.
Yeah.
From the post office, which used to double up as video rental, right?
Love it.
So I'd get up in the morning. There'd be the Terminator down in the living room. I'd try and watch it with my breakfast, or there'd be Aliens or Raw Deal, or whatever, these kind of movies and stuff. And so, like, I guess, I developed a sort of, well, I'm not put off by gore. It's like, Sarah, my partner, who and everything, like, I try to like ask her if she wants to watch, like, scary movie, gory movie, but it's not her bag. And so, like, but the Peter Jackson ones are just so brilliant because they're just so DIY. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, they're just so, like, because actually when I was in the hostel, we made me and my mates, we made this really rudimentary martial arts film with
Incredible.
like a high 8 video and a wetsuit stuffed with, I don't know, toilet paper to act as a dummy or something like that.
Have you still got that?
Yeah, it's somewhere actually. It is somewhere, and like and when things like Peter Jackson having that, it kind of like, don't know, man. It's sort of like, oh yeah, I get what you're trying to do, man.
Yeah,
you know, all this kind of slow budget. I know what you're trying to do. Yeah, you're doing that. You're trying to get that shot. You're trying to make this happen, all the rest of it. And it's just really disgusting, but super hilarious. And then the whole like Kiwi kind of like nature of it. It's very comedic. The actors are hilarious. And it reminds me a bit. There's another one. Was it Shark versus?
Oh yeah.
Do you know what I mean? There's also
Mega Shark versus the Asylum lot.
Something like that, yeah. And it's got a similar kind of vibe. It's it's bizarre, it's bonkers, and it's very grotesque, but it's done in a very tongue-in-cheek kind of way.
Yeah. No, I love his stuff, and for years I just was so put off Lord of the Rings. I've just not grown up reading Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
I always said, talking trees, nah, can't get on board. And then someone said, you should watch those films. I was like, I can't, not a fantasy guy. And they, you should watch it like based on the fact it's a Peter Jackson film. And I went, right. And as soon as that unlocked something, and I kind of watched it through that lens, and I was like, this is like a proper horror film that he's managed to get through under the guise of like a 9-hour epic. Really creepy. Yeah, I think he's a great filmmaker.
So, what film has maybe been too much? Is that an alright question to ask in terms of like, oh, this is like, this is a gore fest, I can't handle it?
For me,
yeah.
I don't know. It takes a lot for me to actually turn off something, and I don't really, because I feel like I owe it to the filmmaker. And I've only ever walked out of one film, and that was 50 Shades of Grey, and that was only because I had to get a train. That was only because I would have watched the whole thing, right? No, love you, Sam Taylor Wood. But no, I don't. It's a film, isn't it? It's a film,
yeah,
so
yeah.
I can't. I love this new batch of kind of new genre filmmakers. Robert Eggers, Ari Aster. Osgood Perkins, that new Longlegs film looks great. I saw a film called I saw the TV Glow the other day, which is really interesting. That's sort of about 90s culture, but through like a teenager who's thinking about their gender identity, and it's just one that feels like a Lynch film as well. But there's nothing that, I don't know, because I seek it out. I'm almost like, you're not telling me what
you're
to watch.
You're not going to scare me.
Yeah. Exactly. So I was like, Serbian film, fine. Human Centipede, fine. It's more like, because this is cheesy, but because I'm a dad, if it's got kids in it, actually, the thing is, I watched a film called When Evil Lurks, which went straight to Shudder, and it's about a kind of demonic possession of this town, and I love horror films from Latin countries because it's got this whole kind of Catholicist vibe, guilt through it. And there's a scene in that where these parents are having an argument. The dad's estranged. He's come back. So you've got to get out of this town. It's all going to be possessed. And there's an 8-year-old kid at the back going, Dad. The kid's trying to get the parents to come over because his sister's being savaged by the family dog. Right, and this dog is like ripping this kid like a rag doll, and I was like, oh my god, it's stuff like that where I can go, how are you allowed to see this or watch this, or make this, and how have you come up with this? And even then, I don't really feel like, I don't know, like I say, I sort of seek it out. I really sort of want to be disturbed by something, and there's not really, I don't know, what do you think? Is there something that you've seen where you go, that's it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm maybe a bit similar. I've definitely I've sat through stuff. Like I watched Bone Tomahawk. Have you seen that?
Yeah. I did the publicity for that film.
that is pretty full on. When it kicks off, it's like, oh right, okay, we're here. I think things that unsettle me more and more the psychological stuff. Like whenever I watch, you watch something like Insidious or whatever.
Yeah.
Whenever I watch a horror movie and they start chucking in effects, like they fast forward some creepy crawly coming towards you or something like that. I'm like, oh, for God's sake, stop it. I'm check out immediately. But There was a film called It Follows.
Yes.
I don't know. And that was pretty good. That was pretty, I thought, on edge. Pretty weird. You don't think that's the reality, but it is the reality. And I think that's quite. I think when films, like when a zombie movie starts, for example, and it's all normal, and you just see somebody scarpering like mad in the background, you don't pay any attention to it. I like things that suggest that. Obviously, you can't sustain that, but that idea of like the normalcy, like behind the normalcy, can be something quite sinister.
Yeah,
can be quite true when they pull on that. And I used to be a big fan of Alfred Hitchcock. Well, I still am a big fan of Alfred Hitchcock movies actually. And I sort of like it would actually form part of inspiration for a show once. But I thought of like some of his films are a bit like that. There's this sort of normalcy, but there's something like the film Rope, where they kill a guy, and they put him in the trunk and they have the party. That's amazing. That's just like an amazing movie. And but it's just all normal, but there's a very sort of deeply dark, sinister thing going on. And I think stuff like that I find quite, that's very intriguing for me. But the one film that did put the poops on me, I suppose, was The Descent.
Yes, great.
Oh
film.
my gosh,
Yeah.
I've never gone to bed like trying to like looking like what's in the corner of my room before, after I saw that movie, man.
Yeah, that's because it's claustrophobic as well, isn't it?
Oh, that's the worst. Yeah. Oh, it's the worst. It's absolutely the worst.
I guess it's like there's maybe something about growing old as well, and I've told this story on the podcast before, but when I was growing up, I must have watched David Fincher's Seven every weekend.
Yeah.
I'd got it on VHS of that Terminator, Aliens, Tim Burton's Batman on rotation, right? And cool film, brilliant film. I watched it again recently, and my partner came into the bathroom and said, "How long have you been in that shower?" And I went, "I don't know." She said, "I know, you've been in that shower 45 minutes. What are you doing?" I was like, I'm just thinking about Seven." She's like, "Well," and it's something profoundly like disturbing. She's like, "Turn it off, you're wasting water." Just like really disturbed me about watching it this time. I don't know if it's because it sort of hits home that dynamic between Detective Mills and his partner, and that whole thing about her being pregnant and then not telling him and all that stuff, where you're a young age, you just don't gloss over. It's like, oh, who's going to get killed next? That really sort of
totally. And it's really interesting actually. Honestly, it's like sometimes I've been going through a phase now. I don't think I can give you an example, unfortunately, but I've been going through a phase now where I've been re-watching some stuff or encountering stuff that I watched when I was younger, or music that I used to listen to when I was younger, and listening to it now, and just seeing like the meaning actually, like behind it, because when you were younger, you didn't really quite grasp it. Like the sentiment in a song or the subtleties in a film, or what it's, what it's really signifying and stuff like that. And I find that really interesting to kind of rediscover some things. It goes the other way too. I mean, like I was watching, I don't know, I had a period where like a bit of comfort TV. I was we'll watch Friends, and I was like, oh no thanks.
I think you'd really like that. I saw the TV Globe, because there's a bit in that where the characters grow up a little, and then they re-watch this show they were obsessed with in the 90s, and they just see it for not what it is, because they obviously got so much out of it, but like it feels really hokey to them, and they've outgrown it, and it doesn't really chime with it who they are now. So I hope that gets a cinema. I think it's getting its cinema release at the end of July, so I'd recommend that.
Believe Me is written and edited by me, Chris Boyd, with production support from Steve Marshall. The music is by Johnny Boyle, and our logo is by Russ Brown. If you like the show, please do hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you out there next time.